Well, when I was 3 years old, I delivered some messages to my mother that I had really understood from other people. My mother didn't understand what I was talking about. I told her about colours around people and how the colours changed. And my mother said to me, she said, "I believe you, but we don't talk about that outside the house. Just you and I talk about it and we keep it private." So my father knew, my eldest brother knew, my younger brothers didn't know. So that would be the earliest. And then most probably the first experience of that would have been about a year later when my uncle came to visit, and I reached up and put my hand on his stomach, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, that's all dirty, it's all dirty, it's all dirty." And I didn't know that that meant sickness, but he died of stomach cancer. And so when he died of stomach cancer, I started to understand all different patterns, shades, shadows, marks in the aura. The human aura is a reflection of who we are in mind, body and soul. The most spiritual person I've ever met, and I've met lots from Tibetan monks to you know it, but the most spiritual person I've ever met was a lady who was 88 years old. She was in Melbourne here in Australia, and she was a Christian, a devout Christian from the Church of England church. But all her life, since she was 15 years old, she had saved her money and given money for homeless people. She had done charity work. And now, at the age of 88, with only a pension for an income, she was buying up food and cooking hot meals and then taking them in a little shopping trolley down to where all the homeless people were and feeding them a hot meal. So she was living life outside of who she was as a person. She was living life for other people and understanding their needs. That gives you something that doesn't often appear in auras, and that is grace. Grace, grace, which is holiness, spirituality, inner guidance, higher guidance. It's all those things. Well, my reputation for being down to earth, practical, and reasonably fair-minded, as much as I possibly can be, and non-judgmental. When you see auras, that's something you no longer do, because everybody's got things in their auras that they don't want anybody else to know. And so you can't make judgments. But I've been sought out by, oh my God, doctors, police, detectives, people whose children have run away and they don't know where they are. I did a lot of that work in my 30s and my 40s, and I think into my early 50s I decided that I didn't want to do that work anymore, because people hang off you. All their pain and their anguish, especially if that child has been kidnapped, especially if that child has been tortured or sexually assaulted before it died, and people hang off you. Doctors can, that are frustrated, x-rays don't show anything and the person is sick. Ultrasounds don't show anything and the person is sick. And they just don't know. And because they are doctors and they care. They wish that they had more insight. And so I usually say to those doctors that once you make peace with yourself, all of your natural abilities that you were born with come back to you. And then you get more insight. Give an example. An old lady, she was in hospital, and one of the doctors said to me, "She just doesn't get better. We do all the tests and she's recovered from all of her injuries and her illness, but for some reason something just doesn't move and she still stays sick. But it doesn't show on any of the tests." So they take me into the room and I say to the lady, "How long have you had the pain down here? Looks pretty old." And she said, "Oh, about 20, 30 years. And her husband, who's sitting next to her, said, "Oh, it'd have to be 30 years you've had that pain there." And the doctors say, "What pain?" She'd never told them because she'd had it for so long, she'd just grown used to it. But it was that little pain that needed something unblocked that fixed her up. Now, the doctors, I believe that everybody in the healing profession, everybody in the teaching profession, anybody that has to deal with humans, paramedics, ambulance crew, nurses, doctors, teachers, social workers, everybody should have a responsibility in those professions to develop into a level of insight. That means a greater understanding of the people that they're working with. Well, I think I've been on radio around the world in different countries. I've been on television in different countries. I've had newspaper articles, magazine articles, documentaries, television programs, all about me. I don't find them fascinating. I don't find them interesting. People find me interesting, and they think that I'm so different from them. And the only difference between me and them is that for some reason, when I was born, I didn't close down. For some reason, I didn't close down any of the insight that I was born with. Every child that is born comes into life and they ask questions. Why does this happen? Why do you do this? How does this work? And that's part of their knowing. And a lot of children, you watch their eyes, children at the age of 1, children at the age of 2, and they're not looking at you, they're looking outside you and looking above you and looking around you, simply because they still see all those patterns. They can see who you are and all the patterns. So over the years, I've been written about, talked about, documented, recorded, filmed, because people find that fascinating. I don't know why that happened to me and it didn't happen to anybody else. I do know that people who go into a healing profession often develop an ability to see energy around people. But they haven't, the difference between me seeing energy and them seeing energy is just the longevity that I've been doing it. They come into their healing profession maybe about at the age of 20 or 30 or 40, even 50. And so they're starting. Mine started when I was a child. And so in my journey, developing this, nobody understood what I was talking about. I was 27 years old when I learnt by accident or guidance how to switch it off, how to turn it off, to give myself peace. Can you imagine what it's like walking down the street and you see everything about everybody right in front of you? You know that the man standing on the corner is having an affair. You know that the woman that is standing next to him and holding his hand doesn't know that he's having the affair. You know that the girl waiting behind 2 or 3 people, you know that she's been sexually assaulted as a child. You know all these things about people, straight up. And so what happens to me and what happened to my husband Paul, when I meet someone, I know lots of things about them, and I have a tendency, when I know that they're a nice person, I walk up and I give them a hug. Hello. Most people say, hello, good to meet you, or they shake their hands. I don't. I go up and say, oh, hello, and I give them a big warm hug, as if, and people say that when I hug them, they feel as though they've known me for the last 20, 30 years. And that's simply because what I recognise in them as being honest, fair, respectful, with a level of humility. So as far as seeing auras go, lots of people come to me and say, I want to learn to see auras, and I have one question: why? Why? Why do you want to see auras? Oh, I'd like to know. Would you like to know? Do you really want to know? Because when you see auras the way that I see them, comes a huge responsibility. I have met clairvoyants who have been very talented. Can't see auras, but very talented insight. And they have used it in a very reckless way. I watched a clairvoyant who is documented in my aura book. I got so angry with her, I put her in my aura book. She walked up to a woman and she said, wow, she said, what a terrible thing you're going through right now. Your husband, attacking your home, having to get restraining orders from the court, whatever you're doing. And this woman was waiting in a queue for coffee. And she said this in front of 40, 50 people, totally embarrassing the woman who was going through all this grief. I got so angry, I took my shoe off and I threw it at her. I threw it at her because that's somebody showing off. That's not somebody, she was just showing off how clever I am. And the egotist was coming out and saying, look at me, I know everything. No. And auras and healers simply turn. And what did I do? I went over to the woman, I picked up my shoe, went over to get my shoe back on, right? And then I went over to the woman and I said to her, I took her by the hand and I said, come with me, we need to talk. And I sat down and I told her where she was weak, where she was being a victim, how she could strengthen that up, how she could protect her child, what her eldest daughter was going through, and why she was withdrawing and not talking to a father nor a mother or her grandparents. I was able to do all of that. That's responsibility. So when you see auras, I always want to know, and I've taught many people to do it, many, many, many people to do it, because it's only awakening something that is outside of yourself. You just need to bring it in. And it's certain little shifts that you can make in your psyche that brings that in very slowly. The difficulty is when people see the energy fields around their client or their friend or their children or their mother, they don't know how to interpret them, because auras move all the time. But they move in pulses, like boom, boom, like that, like that. One will cut across like that, one will cut. The aura down below the hip and the feet doesn't move. And I've learnt that everything that happens up here all moves around as it sorts itself out with its feelings and its emotions and its level of intelligence and its level of spirituality. It sorts out what it wants to do, which one is going to dominate the other, and then it moves down here. Give you an example. A lady came to me to do her aura, and she was about 36 years old. She'd been in India in an ashram for 2 years, developing her spirituality, meditating. She wanted to become a yoga teacher, So she decided that that's what she wanted to do, spend 2 years focusing just on that. When she came to me, I looked at her aura and I said, where have you been contemplating your navel? I said, you've worked on yourself for quite some time. And she said, yes. She said, oh, do you see that? And I said, yes. I said, but I can see something that's stopping you from going forward. And she said, what? I said, you see that? I said, I picked up a colour pencil and I drew it for her. She said, what's that at my feet? And I said, that's 2 colours there show me that you've got a relationship in your life that's closely connected with you that you have not dealt with. And she said, and I said, and by the little sparks out the side, it's male. She said, that's my father. She said, I haven't spoken to my father for 15 years. And I said, well, until you deal with that, you're not going to shine. And she went, 2 years later, she came back to see me. And she said, I've got my aura drawing that you did. She said, could you do it now? And then we'll compare them. I went, yes. And it had gone. And she told me that she'd sought out her father because she was on a spiritual path. She'd sought out her father. She'd come to terms with it. She'd built up a relationship with him. They became friends so that now she could be whole. She'd done all the work on herself. So it's those little things that people need to shift to let the spirit in. When you are who you are, like me, little old me, right, weird things happen to you, really weird things. Whether it's the higher self or whether or not it's the universal consciousness, I don't know. But I had a few really weird things. I was doing all the aura readings, and I was at a big spiritual awareness show, and I could feel somebody watching me, and there was a lady standing outside the booth where I was working, and she just kept looking, and she waited for a gap in between the people coming to see me, and she came over, and she said to one of my staff, how do I get to talk to Judith? And they said, she's booked out. She's booked out till 6 o'clock tonight and there's no gaps whatsoever, but she's totally booked out. And the woman said, but I need to talk to her. I have a piece of paper that I need to show her. And they said, well, we will tell her and then you come back in an hour and I'll see if I've got an answer. So my staff come over and said, this woman's got a piece of paper that was given to her 15 years ago and she's got to give it to you. And it was the piece of paper that she was given to her in England 15 years ago, and she's got to give it to you. And I went, it's one of those woo-woo moments, you know, the woo-woos. So I thought, hello, who's up there working? So I decided to ask 2 people who had been to see me before if they could come back later, which they did. And I saw this woman, and it was amazing. She told me that 15 years ago, she was a young woman waiting to be married. She was engaged to be married, when an old man who walked along the platform of the railway station said to her, oh, you'll go to Australia. In your future, you will go to Australia and you will meet a woman, and this is her name, and you will talk to her and you will give this message from me. Anyway, so she says, I've got this message written down. I've kept it. I kept it in the back of my purse all these years. She said, because we've now moved to Australia. And she said, it's rung in my head. She said, 15 years ago, I didn't think we were going to go to Australia. She said, but here we are. We're now living in Australia. So she said, I walked into this show and then I saw your name up there. Judith Collins. That's the same name that's on my paper. So she said, I didn't think I was going to meet you today, but I went to my bag and there it is. And it describes you. Anyway, I get the paper from her and I read the message on it and I went, oh my God. It was from Harry Edwards, who has been dead now for many years. Harry Edwards was most probably being one of the most world famous healers in the world, yeah. And the message was from him, and had been delivered 15 years later to me. And it was at that point of time that the message on that paper said to me, protect yourself. And I knew what that was. I was being used by, I was allowing myself to be used by police, doctors, school teachers, social workers, everybody who needed answers to help the people they were helping. And I had everybody pulling at me each way. And I would come home and that I'd be lying there thinking about this person or that child or this sick person and whatever. And then when I got the message, I got it at the right time from one of the world's greatest healers. 15 years later, the message that I was meant to get. Say, do what you need to do. Don't let these people hang on to you and pull you down. She had to deliver it to me because it was in his handwriting, which I had verified. Yes, I had that verified.
Okay, I thought that lady was sick.
Yeah, the lady herself was sick. And she wanted to come to me for healing. And so I wrote this book, I Want to Be Healed, many years ago. Got my picture on the back of it. And so she saw that book there and she started to talk to me about being sick and what could I do to help her. And so, yes, I was able to help her through the healing, yeah. Well, how many books have I written? Lots. I've been writing for 40-something years, so lots of books over that time. Some of the books aren't in print anymore because they were produced under a publisher who sold off the publishing company to a big publisher. Other books, like My Companion Gardening in Australia, that's an interesting story. When you can see auras, you can see the auras of mosquitoes, spiders, plants, trees, worms in the soil, bugs in the soil. You can see all of that. And so 33 years ago, I wrote a book called Companion Gardening in Australia. It's been selling non-stop for 33 years. Because people are fascinated with, once they use the techniques that I put in the book about growing broccoli plant and planting the lettuce underneath the leaves of the broccoli, they look at how they work, and all of a sudden people who have been growing vegetables and food find it more successful. And because I understand the energy that works between the plants and how it all works in the soil, and how all the roots communicate with each other and so on. And so people, that would most probably be my number one favourite book. Yeah, because what it's doing for the planet, what it's doing for the environment is very important. It's teaching people how to work with Mother Nature, how to do organics, how to work with the environment, how to understand the climate, how to understand the diversity of birds and worms and bugs, and you can't take any one of those things out of the chain of life, otherwise it goes imbalanced. And so once they all read that book and they work with the book, yes. I even, after the bushfire, when we lost everything, which I'll talk about later, I found that the Governor-General of Australia also had my companion gardening book and had also used it in gardening. So you never know who this book reaches, but for 33 years it's not stopped selling. No, I don't have this book on me at the moment, but I will get that book in a little while. We'll ask Paul to get it. My second favourite book, I love this book. It's called The Colour of Life. And The Colour of Life is all about all the colours that fill our life, whether it be in the gardens or whether it be in the homes. What colour to put in your dining room to make sure that everybody that comes to dinner enjoys the company. What colour to put in your children's bedrooms to make sure that they sleep soundly and they don't have nightmares. All of those colours. And that's what auras do for you. You understand the colour of life. So I had an opportunity to put this in the book. And the editor who did this book, which makes it very interesting for me, I love music. And I love all kinds of music. And the editor who worked on this book was a musician, a jazz musician, in his spare time. And we started to talk about the colour of music, the colour of sound, the colour of music as it goes through the air. And I said to him, oh yes, I know all that. And he said, wow, why can't we? I can talk about the music, you can talk about the colours of the music. Let's put it in the book. So it's in the book on the colour of music. The colours that make a hit song. The colours that make a song last for generations and generations that live on. All those colour combinations of music that reach our soul, reach our hearts. It's all in that book and I love it. Yeah. And then of course the big seller is that. The Aura book. Yes, the Aura book. People come up to me and that have read the Aura book, and they're people from all walks of life. They're not people looking to read auras. They're not looking for spirituality. They've picked up the book because they've seen my name, read an article, watched me on a documentary, seen me on television, heard me on the radio. So they decide to get the book. And then those are the very people who come up to me wherever they see me and tell me how it changed their life. Because people who don't see auras often feel them. And they feel like a mother knows that there's something wrong with her 14-year-old son. He's not doing anything, he's not getting into trouble, but she knows that there's something wrong. And that's her and her knowing. If you develop that knowing and that understanding, that comes into seeing patterns of energy, and that goes into the aura. So I mean, they're basically, and the other one of course would be this one, Awakening the Miracle of You. I wrote this book for people to hang on to all their life, all their life. This book was designed and is designed to help people through every circumstance that they could ever experience. A young woman with a young baby whose husband doesn't come home that night because he's been killed in a car accident. In here it helps her deal with that. A couple whose son hangs himself in the garage, commits suicide, it's in here and it helps with that. A young couple who've been trying to have children and they've lost baby after baby after baby, and that's in here. People who have been made redundant, lost all their money, people who have lost their jobs, people whose companies have gone bust, it's all in this book. So I wrote this book for people to buy, to have as a handbook all of their life, to deal with every situation that they would encounter. It's a self-healing book. The bushfire happened on the 19th of December in our lives in 2019. I was out in the veggie patch in the morning picking all our fruit and vegetables and that for lunch, to make lunch, when I noticed that there was a pink energy swirling around. So I looked into that energy and I looked at the plants and the energy of the plants, of all the vegetable plants, and I went in and looked at the fruit trees, the lemon tree, and all of the energy around the lemon trees, all of it was just going into chaos, total chaos. And so I thought, something is happening, something is happening. In the morning, the fire brigade had been down here and said, oh, no chance for fire here. There's no fire in this area, so it's all over there. And what happened to us, half an hour later, the wind changed, spun it around, and we lost everything we own. We lost the house, we lost vehicles, we lost all the farm animals. So we lost the fish in the dams, we lost our pigs, our sheep, our milking cow, our ducks, our geese, our turkeys, our quail, our chickens, our meat rabbits, all of them died in the fire. We lost pets in the fire, and we lost everything we owned, and we lost all our wedding photos as well. So everything we owned. The only thing that we escaped with was one car and the clothes that we had, plus a bag of documents, a couple of computers. And that's what we escaped with. Yeah. After the fire, straight after the fire, Paul and I my husband Paul and I, we just looked at each other and just said, well, everything will be gone. And he said, maybe not everything. And I said to him, trust me, darling. I said, everything's gone. I could tune in to all the pain of all the animals dying. The love of my life in all our animals was our pigs, because they're intelligent. They've got the intelligence of a 5-year-old child. And after the fire, just an hour after we escaped the fire, we parked in a public park. And I sat there and I kept communicating with the pigs, and I kept saying to one of our pigs, her name was Missy, and she was very big and she weighed 100 kilos, right? So she could push anything. And I kept saying to her, I said, Missy, open the gate. Open the gate, Missy, and let everybody out. Missy, open the gate. Let everybody out. Missy, please open the gate. And then I tuned in. I said to Paul, she's opened the gate. She's opened the gate. And she let them out. But when 2 weeks after the fire, all the pigs died because of smoke inhalation. Yeah. But she was clever enough to open the gate, to let them all out, to run to an area where there was no fire. So straight after the fire, we realised that it would be devastating. So we did what we've always done. What we do with, Paul and I always compare any situation with something else. And so we started to say, we've been members of Amnesty International for many years, right? And so we look at all the work that we have done with Amnesty International over the years. And so we're saying, well, here we are, we're in the fire, we've lost absolutely everything, but not as much as the Syrian refugees living in refugee camps, and all the children who are living in tents who wake up with a toothache and haven't got a dentist, and all the women having babies in tents without doctors or nurses. And compared to what? And I thought, well, we lived in a country where we had family would support us, we had neighbours, we had some friends, they would support us, so we had that. So we compared ourselves to the worst of situations in the world and realised that our situation looked bad to everybody else, but it kept us sane doing that, it kept us sane. We never ever Paul and I have never sat down and cried over the fire because we think that there are people who are worse off in the world than us, and it would be wrong to do that. Totally wrong. When we lost everything in the fire, everything that's material in the fire. And yes, we lost our animals, and we lost memorabilia, everything that we had worked for and saved for. Yes, we lost that. But there's people around the world sitting in refugee camps who have lost their children, their parents, their aunties, their uncles, the whole village. They don't speak the language of anybody else in the village. There are 10-year-old, 5-year-old children who have no family. So what right have we got to cry over losing everything in the fire when there's people all around the world doing worse than, suffering more than we have? And that's how we look at life. It doesn't, after the fire, it didn't make life hard, because I've been Paul's carer for 22 years and he's nearly died 4 times. His health has not been very good for a long time. He has kidney problems. And Paul and I have been together since we were 17 years old, so to part us now in our 70s is going to be very painful. Paul's just come out of hospital 5 days ago. He just came out of hospital, and where the doctors didn't know what was happening with him, but he survived yet again. Now what we find is that just as we've rebuilt the house is not even 2 years old, and now we're being forced by circumstance to sell up our lifestyle and everything that we've put into the house, simply because the lifestyle that we have lived, which has been sustainable, environmentally friendly and self-sufficient for the last 50 years of our life, is no more, because Paul will not be able to lift, pull, push or do any physical work. I can't do the physical work by myself. The costs of all of the overhead costs of the property, such as house insurance and council rates, all the insurances of that are just crippling, just absolutely crippling financially. And so now we're going to be forced to sell. Now the property won't sell at a market price, because although the house is built, we still have burnt fences, we still have burnt pig pens and chicken pens and a burnt out swimming pool, everything that's been damaged by the fire, which we haven't had the time nor the money to be able to repair them. So the real estate agent has told us that when we sell, we could sell as much as $300,000 below the market price, because that's what it would cost people to pay for anyone to come in and repair all the fencing and everything that was destroyed by the fire. Well, if I was to share some kind of a message with the world, which I've done on a few occasions, I'd put it in a way that people can understand it. In the world there is a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment, a lot of sadness. Young people can't see their way into the future because of the environment, because of the prices of housing, the prices of food, the prices of cars, the prices of studying for university degrees, everything, right? Old people can't retire. They have to keep working simply because the cost of living is going up. There's a whole lot of worry in the community. Worry goes into human consciousness and brings the world down. What I want people to remember is that the world is based on one principle. Boy meets girl, they fall in love. They have children. They love their children. And they get excited when their children fall in love and have children, and then they can see their grandchildren grow. That happens in every country all around the world. That's who we are as human beings. We have love to give, love to share. When we look at who we are and all the love that we have for the people in our lives, for close friendships, that love is the glue that holds the world together. Whether it's refugees escaping brutality of an army, whether it's people escaping a tsunami in Indonesia, or earthquakes, they come together because it's the human love that holds us together. A mother, a woman in her 80s can watch a young mother cry over a dead baby in an earthquake, and she understands that, and she has that love, that empathy. Sympathy is not empathy. Empathy gives love, sympathy doesn't. And so it's the love, it's the glue that holds the world together. And the world is well glued together. It will survive anything, because in every country around the world, boy meets girl, they fall in love, they have children. He would protect his children, she would protect their children fall in love, and it's the glue that holds Arabia together, it holds Singapore together, it holds America together despite all the problems they've got over there, it holds China together, it holds them all together, and it's the glue that gives us fairness. That's the glue that gives us an understanding of each other. It's the glue that gives us tolerance for each other. And it's glue that gives us the ability to help each other. That's my message. Many people come to me and they ask me about whether or not I believe in reincarnation, and whether or not I believe there's a life after death. And if someone sees their dead father or dead mother, how are they seeing that image? One of my clients, and the book, this healing book of mine here, is dedicated to him in the introduction. He was dying of cancer. When he came to me, he had cancer throughout his body, and I said to him, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "I want you to give me peace as I die." He said, "I don't want chemotherapy, I don't want radiation, because they will just make me sicker. So I've asked the doctors to give me medication and painkillers, but I want you to give me peace. So if you can heal and give me peace within myself so that I can come to terms with my death." And I said, yes. Well, I did the healing on him, and he was finding himself very relaxed and so on. In the last session that I had with him, he said to me, asked me the questions about life after death, reincarnation, what happens to you after you die, what I've seen in auras, and I see lots of relatives in people's auras. Like you might have a deceased grandmother who never lived long enough to see her granddaughter have a little baby. And the granddaughter's got a little baby, and the grandmother just appears in the aura just to guide her and to be very happy to share that moment. And that's that love that goes on. It goes on after death that I was talking about. So what did this man do? He said to me, "If I write something down on a piece of paper, can you put it in an envelope and seal it up? Put my name on the front?" He said, "Because when I die, if I can get a message back to you, I will say that exact message and you can open that envelope and match it." Well, John was from England, and when he died, his wife went back to England to stay with her sister. And after she'd been there for about 18 months, her sister said to her, "You've got to come to this spiritualist church. You've got to come. I just know you have to come." And John's wife didn't want to go. She didn't believe in any of that. But her sister says, "You're coming." So they go along, and the medium in the church who gets messages from family members and calls on people to answer the messages and so on, said, "Is there a Margaret? We've got a Margaret here who was married to John, who died of cancer. Cancer was throughout his body. Can somebody own up to having that relationship?" And that's how the medium works. And the sister, that Margaret wouldn't put her hand up. So the sister put her hand up. "Yes, we know who John is." And she said, "Does anybody in the audience have a pen and paper?" And a man had it. He said, "This message is to be written down, and it is to be taken to Australia. It is to be given to Judith. And Margaret, you know who Judith is. You've met her, and you know who to give it to." So they wrote the message down, and Margaret came out. Took her another year because she didn't believe in any of this, and she thought, no. But her son was in Australia, just had their first grandchild, so she thought she'd come out to see the grandchild, visit the grandchild. And she was telling her son about the message and the note that she still had, and her son said, "You have to go to Judith. I am driving you to Judith." Anyway, so the son and his wife and their newborn baby, and John's wife sat there when I pulled out the envelope, and I said to Margaret, "You hold that envelope, you open it up, then you get the message out and you read it, because it's not for me, it's for you." And it was exactly the same words. Exactly the same words. That gave me 100% proof that when mediums get messages from deceased relatives to come through to talk to their relatives, right, here on earth, it's true. Why do we have a reincarnation? Well, it really depends, because what I've learnt from auras, and I'm only going to say this because of what I've learnt over the years, because auras to me are like reading books, right? So I can only say this from reading the books of people, right? The auras of people. Reincarnations work normally for the lesson of the people with whom you are sharing your life, not for you as an individual. Yeah. So if I give you an example, somebody might reincarnate into a family, and that family is very distressed. It may be violent, maybe cruel, maybe poverty-stricken, and that soul reincarnates into that family to give them hope. Reincarnation is a very interesting thing. For all of my spiritual abilities, I'm highly skeptical, and I think that it's given me saneness, because I say to myself, where does this come from? Where does this come from? One morning I woke up. This is how the spirit world works. One morning I woke up, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and the windows, the curtains were pulled. Everything was dark, because at 4 o'clock in the morning it's dark. The wardrobe, the door of the wardrobe was all lit up with light. And there was a letter, looked like a letter, imprinted like a camera, like a movie camera showing on the door. And I'm lying there thinking, what the hell is this? What's this? So I begin to read it, and I think, I don't understand this. Why am I getting this? So anyway, I woke Paul up and I said, can you see that? And he went, what? I went, all right, you can't see it. 5 years later, I knew what it was. Yeah, 5 years later. It was a warning from the spiritual world, not so much a warning as, I suppose we would understand the word as a warning. But the spirit world had said that I needed to give a message across to a lot of people that tomorrow when you wake up, most of the state of New South Wales will be on fire. This was back in the 1990s, yeah, when Sutherland burnt and all of that, yeah. And they said, don't be worried by it. It has a purpose. It will bring all of the services together, ambulance, hospitals, local GPs, police, SES, fire brigades, and this will be the thing that creates the workings of them all together for any disaster that follows.